So here you can see the view right outside our hotel. This is where you can also go for a run. There's a runner's path. Just super beautiful and lots of things to do here on the island. Also here is the rose garden where I walked to in the morning. After breakfast I took a walk, and lots of green space here where you can just enjoy the time before or after the game. Here you can see me preparing before the game. What I mostly do is check my opponents for 1 or 2 hours and then try to find the best possible opening to play against them. You can see via different softwares I use ChessBase, see their games online which they have played in the past, and then I try to find something that doesn't fit their style. We are going to round 1 of the Olympiad pretty soon. It's now almost 2 p.m. The bus from our hotel leaves at 2:15, so we're now almost ready for our first game against the Ivory Coast, and I will see you in the recap after the round. Let's see how it goes. This is me before the round started, and as you can see, the Austrian Federation suited us up nicely, and also our opponents had a really cool team suit. What's up, guys? I just got back from my game. It was pretty smooth, I would say. I won in like 20 moves, I believe. With the black pieces, went pretty nicely, and it's also looking good for the team. So I cannot complain about how the match is going. I can only complain a little bit about how the organization with the transfers went, because I finished my game at around 3:25. Oh, sorry, not 3:25, but 5:25. And the bus was supposed to leave at 5:30, and I was there at like 5:31 or so, and the bus obviously, which is supposed to be going to my hotel, just left in front of my eyes. And yeah, then they told me that I have to wait for 1 hour for the bus, which I think is a bit extreme. Like, even, I mean, half an hour to wait is kind of okay, but to wait for 1 hour is, I think, pretty ridiculous. I will also tell this to some of the responsible people. I think this should not happen in a chess Olympiad. Obviously, it's very hard. I mean, there are so many players, many hotels. So I don't. This is not like a like a rant about it. It's more like a constructive critique on what to do better. But yeah, this was not perfect. And then I ended up sharing a taxi with 2 other players, which was then a much faster option. But yeah, enough complaining now. Enough critiquing. The game went fine. Cannot complain about anything. Now I will take some rest, go to the gym, go for a run, and yeah, I will see you soon in the recap. What I try to do after the game, basically always in every tournament, is to get at least some sort of physical exercise. I went for a run today after the game, and then I went to the gym, trained some upper body. Here you can see me doing some pull-ups. So I think that's very important for me, at least, to keep like a physical component as well to all of the mental exhaustion, so that you can just get your mind off of things. And yeah, this is just something that really helps me to clear my mind after the game. What's up, everybody? We won the match with 4-0 against Ivory Coast, and I've also played my part winning a game with the black pieces against Manan Yubue Herman, which I hopefully pronounced correctly. Let's jump right into the game and see what happened. So he went for e4, I played c5. And after knight f3, d6, he didn't go for the open Sicilian with d4, but instead he went bishop b5 check. And now I went knight d7, which is basically the biggest way to get a fighting game. Bishop d7 is the other move, but here white often gets a safe position with c4 and then d4. And white can set up like a Morozzi bind, which tends to be very solid for white. But after knight d7, he castled a6, and now he could go bishop d3, which is the main move, but this also loses some time. There is lots of theory here. White usually intends to go c3 next, and then bishop c2, and then to build the center with d4. So this is the other option, but he went for bishop takes d7 check, which I was pretty happy to see. And after bishop d7, now d4, and white has a lead in development here, but I do have the bishop pair, and this line is usually pretty okay for black. C takes d4, queen takes d4, and now I went for e5. The other move being knight f6 here. I was thinking for a bit, but here in the game, at least after bishop g5, e6, I was a bit worried of e5 here because I thought that a lot of pieces would exchange here after bishop e7, rook d1. I would have to move the bishop, and then some endgame could arise, which would be at least harder to win. So therefore, after queen d4, I went e5, queen d3, and now I went h6, which I thought still that this is part of my preparation, at least from some time ago. Rook c8 being the other move. Important to know is that knight f6 is a worse move than either rook c8 or h6, because now white will get bishop g5, and he can exchange this this knight here, and then often can just put the knight from c3 to d5 when white is at least a little bit better. So h6, just this is the idea, to prepare knight f6 without allowing bishop g5, pinning the knight and possibly taking it. He went knight c3, and now I went knight f6 because there's no more bishop g5. He went a4, now rook c8, and here he went bishop e3, which I was a bit surprised. As the engine also indicates, usually white wants to play knight d2 when his threat, or I would almost say, is knight c4 and then knight e3. So white wants to play for the d5 square here, and therefore he wants to reroute the knight to e3. So I think now bishop e7 would be a bit inaccurate after knight c4. For example, queen c7, knight e3. I thought white has some chances maybe to play for an edge. Still, black is very solid here. But therefore my plan after knight d2 was to play either bishop e6 or queen c7. I wasn't entirely sure, just to stop knight c4 and knight e3. But I still thought white should go for this, and then for something like rook d1, followed by knight f1, knight e3. But here it turns out, now I just see what the engine says, d5, and I'm even more than fine already. If I get this push with d5, then both of my two bishops open up, so it makes a lot of sense here. Yeah, therefore maybe he could have started with knight d2 right away, but then I have b5. This is also what I thought. And after a4, computer says rook b8. I wanted to play b4 here, and I thought I would be totally fine here. Again, position is very complex, but not worse for me. But after a4, rook c8, now bishop e3. Now I went bishop e7, and now he went a5. Hinting at bishop b6, which would trap my queen on the 8. So therefore I went queen c7, and now after bishop b6, I thought I could go queen c4, but also queen c6. Both are basically at least not a problem for me. He went knight d2, short castle, bishop b6. So he played knight d2 to not allow queen c4, but now I just went queen c6. And now I think he started to go really in the wrong direction with rook c1. This just doesn't do that much. In the game, I thought he should go for rook d1. And then again to try this plan with knight f1, followed by knight e3. And whoops. And then the knight will possibly go to d5. If he can. So this would be the best plan. But even here, I thought I can go bishop e6, knight f1, and I always have this plan with knight d7 now hitting the bishop. And yeah, if the bishop goes back, then he again doesn't have knight e3, and I have possibly some ideas with f5 in many cases. But yeah, he went rook c1, which I thought was a bit strange. He protects the pawn c2, and maybe his idea is to play knight d5, but I simply went bishop e6, and now he doesn't have knight d5 anymore, and the best move for him is probably to go rook d1 back. So yeah, this plan with rook c1 just didn't really work out for him. But he went knight d2, and this was already, I would argue, the final mistake. Now I just get d5, and the position is opening up. All of his pieces are pretty misplaced. Yeah, and his position is already much worse, probably already lost. He takes d5 again, another inaccuracy, but the position is just bad already. Knight c3 indicated by the computer is better, but it still looks pretty bad for white overall after something like d takes e4, for example. Knight takes e4, and I thought that even something like this, if I would take and then push f5 at some point, then I'm also much better. But apparently knight d7 is even much stronger, not exchanging these knights, hitting the bishop on b6, and then going for f5 followed by e4. But he took on d5, knight takes d5, and now he's just in a huge dilemma. His bishop on b6 is kind of hanging. At least I will win a pawn after knight takes b6. And if he moves the bishop here, I thought rook d8 would be winning. It's also a great move. Yeah, the rook is just in front of the queen now. I'm threatening all sorts of knight moves, knight f4, for example, knight b4, and this would also be lost as well for him. I also thought knight takes e3 is basically winning by force. After queen e3, I have bishop g5 with this pin. So yeah, I thought here his position is already lost. He went queen g3, and after knight b6, a b6, I could just take on b6 when I would be a pawn up and just winning because my two bishops are just so strong. But I went for the more concrete and probably objectively better approach with bishop g5, which is just winning on the spot here. He went for knight f3, which just gave the exchange. I thought rook d1 would keep the material at least for now, but after queen c2, now I'm pinning these two knights, and I thought he doesn't really have a way to defend this, actually. I thought he would just lose a piece. After rook c1, I can pick up at least this pawn. Also, the pawn on b6 will fall, so this is just winning for me. He went knight f3, I took on c1, now f6, simply protecting the pawn on e5, knight h4, now I take the pawn on b6, b3, rook d8, and now after knight g6 I had rook takes c2, and here he resigned. It was not necessary. I could also just protect the check on e7 somehow, the fork, but I thought rook c2 is just forces resignation, which apparently it did. I thought only important is after knight e7 that I would go king f8. Probably not that important, but after king f7 there are all sorts of queen g6 checks possibly. And yeah, after king f8, I thought knight g6 check, and now either king f7 or my preferred move would have been king e8, again not allowing any checks at all. And if he takes on c2, obviously there is always checkmate on d1, and otherwise he will just lose a piece, or I mean he will lose everything. The pawn on b3 is also hanging, so this is just game over here. So I think I'm pretty satisfied with how the game went today. I just played a normal opening, and then as expected, at least, or as I hoped, he just succumbed to the pressure at some point. And I'm also happy with how the team played. 4-0 in the first game. Obviously tomorrow will be a tougher match, but it was a great start into the tournament. And yeah, thank you for watching, and I will see you in tomorrow's recap.